Welcome to the Happy and Corporate podcast. This podcast is created to help you design the happiness you want in a corporate world, but also to discover your leadership style. This podcast is really made for you and really built also by you. So in this podcast, we hear about guests, we hear about content from coaching, from training, from books, etc. Really help you develop your leadership style in the workplace and just simply be happy. I am Benet Lenoir. I am a certified executive coach and a seller at heart. This is my podcast. Today in the podcast, we are welcoming Nausheen Chen. Nausheen is really an expert at public speaking. She does train a lot of people on public speaking skills and techniques, and I did feel personally that I had to upskill my game. I'm sorry the sound is a disaster on my side, but Nausheen's sound is perfect, and she's packing her speech with golden nuggets for you. So I'm really happy to welcome you to this conversation with Nausheen. Nice to have you on the podcast, Nausheen.
Thank you so much for having me, Benny. It's a pleasure to meet you.
For those of you who are listening to us, you don't see maybe the colorful background that Nausheen has and how her purple hair stands out. If not, you need to watch out for her LinkedIn. She has also lovely pictures there. But maybe, do you want to start by introducing yourself for people listening to us today?
Sure. So I'm Nausheen. I'm a public speaking coach, which means that I help people speak better on camera, on stage, in Zoom meetings that everyone hates. And I took the long way around to getting here. I was in the corporate world, Procter & Gamble. That was my first job. I was in marketing, in PR. I thought I was set for life, that I would retire from P&G. But of course, life had other plans. I realized that I wanted to do something else. I took some time off, traveled around, had a wonderful late quarter life crisis where I broke away from everything and did a lot of experimentation during that time, including acting on stage, doing improv, doing stand up, directing and acting in a crappy little comedy segment on a late night show. And out of that, I stumbled into filmmaking, and I was a filmmaker for 7 years. Never felt like one. I never felt like this was supposed to be my dream or my calling in life. But at the same time, I didn't know what would replace it. And then one day, my husband pointed out to me that speaking in public, speaking on stages has been the one thing that has been that common thread across my career changes, across continents, across audiences, disciplines, regardless of whether I was doing workshops on filmmaking or going on stage and talking about my life story or going to a neighborhood coffee shop event and talking about a random story that happened to me when I was a kid. Regardless of all of that, the thing that was common was that I loved getting on stage and speaking to an audience. And he said, why don't you look into that? See if you can make something out of it. And that was the first time that things started stirring. And that was a year and a half ago. So I discovered through building in public, posting on LinkedIn, getting some proof of concept, working with early clients, all of that helped me structure what I do now, which is coaching people, both corporate execs and entrepreneurs, on how to become more effective speakers.
And even in that intro, we can see how you became, your body language also speaks behind the way you speak, the hands movement that, we cannot maybe capture in terms of audio, but also there is no air, etc. I feel like this podcast is going to be really easy to edit.
I like that.
But yeah, so it's interesting how you tried some different things and then you realize common thread is public speaking. And so now you help people with that. What do you feel are because it's an entrepreneurial space and you're starting your business and it's been a year and a half. So what are the strengths that have helped you get there and get in our space and make your own name for yourself?
This is the second time round that I'm an entrepreneur. The first time round was when I was a filmmaker. So I had some experience, but at the same time, I don't have an MBA. And even when I was doing the filmmaking work, I only knew what I was doing maybe 37% of the time. The rest of the time, I was just drowning or felt like I was drowning in work and with everything else that was going on. So some of that helped in terms of bringing in the entrepreneurial mindset. But more than that, what really helped was the clients. It was every single time that I worked with someone, they brought in new insights, new ways of working that I understood that I had to be adaptable to. So this was the first time that I was doing something that was so personalized in my corporate work and my filmmaking work. I'd always dealt with companies. It was always B2B stuff. And now I was dealing with people and working with behaviors that were ingrained in people for decades and working with them on changing those behaviors. So massively challenging, but also massively rewarding. And that's what's helped me shape the coaching side of things. And on the business side of things, I am still learning, very much so, figuring out how all the different parts of the marketing funnel work. I wasn't entirely aware of funnels till about 2 years ago. So it's all very new. I'm still learning how to integrate different kinds of content, the top of the funnel, the middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel stuff, and how to make sure that there is a strong business model. It's all evolving, it's in flux.
I think it's interesting because sometimes you look at entrepreneurs and you feel like they have, pardon my French, but they have their shit together and they know everything about everything. And I feel like it also demystifies this because you're like, I probably did know 30% of what I was doing. So also maybe being comfortable with not knowing and building your support system of people who might know or where you can find those answers that you need. So it's really interesting also for everybody who might be willing to go into that entrepreneurial journey to have that kind of feedback on it's okay if you don't know everything about everything. And that's something that you can build over time with that experience within that space. Um, Anything that you would have wished you would have known sooner, whether on the public speaking journey or also building a business?
On the public speaking journey, I enjoyed the fact that this is something that just happened organically as a result of my interest in the field. So I did it's funny. I actually took a direction here that I didn't take anywhere else in life because I'm very much a nerd. I love going to school. I love going to university. I love studying. I'm very weird. But this was one thing that I didn't study. I just learned through experience. So I actually feel like I'm doing something new for the first time where I'm not following someone else's path. I am coming up with my own frameworks based on my experience. I'm coming up with ways to solve client challenges based on what I've gone through and what I've experienced over 17 years. So I often joke with my clients and tell them that it took me 17 years so that it doesn't take you 17 years. And I want to make sure that I give you the shortcuts that I learned the hard way around. And I'm kind of proud of that, of knowing that I've lived through these experiences. But when it comes to business, for sure, I would love to figure out if there is a way for me to get more coaching or if I could get coaching earlier on. Some of the best level ups that I've done over the last year have always been a result of coaching, whether it's LinkedIn coaching, whether it's sales coaching, or just coaching on my overall state of mind, state of affairs. One of the best things that one of my coaches told me is that there are two types of problems, essentially. There's a find out problem and there is a figure out problem. Find out problems are problems where there is a very specific solution. So, what is the best tea to drink if you want to go to sleep? There are very specific answers to that question. But a lot of times, the problems that we have are figure out problems where no one's discovered the solution before. And he told me, Nausheen, there hasn't been another public speaking coach who's building her business remotely after 2 different career pivots, who's also looking at making sure she's visible on LinkedIn. And just that particular combination of things just probably hasn't happened. It's not that you can Google the answer, you have to figure it out. So, pieces of advice like that, you just, again, can't find. You have to be mindful of seeking out these kinds of people that you can then gather information from and get these incredible insights from.
Hello, more than 90% of you are not yet subscribers of the podcast. And so if you can do me one favor and one favor only, the only favor I'm ever going to ask you is to subscribe to the podcast. It allows me to bring even better guests in the future, even more interesting guests in the future, but also develop this content. Thank you.
I love it. It's such a good example. And it's also demonstrate the importance of building your support system to get to where you want to be. So yeah, I love that you talked about level up. I feel like it's a game stuff, leveling up. So super interesting. I know that recently also on LinkedIn, and obviously for anybody listening to this podcast, do follow her on LinkedIn because she posts amazing content. You talked a lot about the confidence and the how you build your confidence almost behind the stage to be confident on stage. So I was wondering if there are any like tips that you could share with us to fight or I'm not even sure it's like fighting, but accept also sometimes that you are just anxious when speaking publicly. Even I feel anxious speaking to you because I'm like aware of a lot of the things I can not manage. But any tips that you could share with the audience?
You're not the first person to say that they feel anxious talking to me because they feel like I'm judging them. I never judge people that I speak to unless you're a client, because then you're paying me to judge you. And it's still a safe space where we judge the performance together of this person. So in terms of the anxiety and the nerves, there are actually 2 things here that I wanted to touch on. The first one was the confidence piece that you talked about. And I did a lot of deep research into what it is to actually be confident, because I wanted to peel back the layers for my clients and also my community. And the best answer that I found so far is that confidence doesn't arrive before you do the scary thing. But also, you don't just automatically become confident after you do the scary thing, because some people stop at that first step where they say, yeah, okay, you are scared of something, do it scared, and you'll feel confident the second time around. Actually, that's just one piece of the puzzle. So for sure, the action has to come before you feel confident. But the second piece of the puzzle is that you need to put in place a positive feedback loop intentionally in your head. So there was this experiment that this social scientist did. And the scenario, I'll give you an example of the scenario, is that let's say there are 2 people that are playing a game. It can be a game of Scrabble, where one person is someone who has a positive feedback loop where they think positive thoughts, they have a high degree of self-confidence and self-belief, and the other person doesn't. They suffer from low self-esteem or they have self-doubt all the time. So they're both playing this game, and let's imagine a scenario where they're both getting terrible letters at Scrabble. It's possible. You're getting Z's and W's and Q's and you don't know what to make. The person who's confident, they are likely to say that this is a terrible situation. I didn't do that well. I'll do better next time. The person who's not very confident, who's insecure, they're likely to say that I just don't have what it takes. This is my fault. And if you flip it, let's say they're both getting really good letters, or that one of them wins in this scenario. When the confident person wins, they give themselves the credit. And they say, yeah, I did that. And that's how I can do better next time. So in both scenarios, they're telling themselves they're going to do better next time. Whether they win or they lose, it doesn't affect their perception of themselves. The person who's not as secure, even if they win, they are likely to say, that was pure luck. And I don't know if I can replicate that next time. How many times have we told ourselves that? Oh, I got lucky. I had beginner's luck. Oh, that was just a fluke. Oh, the circumstances were good. I got lucky. You don't give yourself credit, you're never going to construct this positive feedback loop that is actually in place to silence or to counter the negative voices in your head. So in a long way, that's what I discovered is at the root of confidence, taking action despite the nerves, and then making sure that you have positive self-talk where you give yourself credit for things that go right, and you have accountability for things that go wrong while knowing that it's not who you are, it's what you've done. Because if it's about who you are, I'm just not a confident person. I just can't do it. It's much harder to change. I didn't do that confidently, that particular talk, but the next talk that I do, I bet I can do better. So that's on that confidence piece. And then for nerves, there are very specific strategies that you can use to calm your nerves, specifically going into a big talk, a big presentation, a big podcast, a live event. You can do a number of things like breathing exercises to get your nerves to calm down. You can reframe nerves as excitement. That's one that actually works for me, where instead of saying to yourself, I'm so nervous, you tell yourself, I really care about the outcome. I'm really excited to do well. And that reframe works really well because the body produces a similar reaction, whether you're nervous and anxious or whether you're excited. Elevated heartbeat, sweaty palms, obsessed thoughts. So if your brain can label the nerves as excitement, you can work with it instead of having to work against it.
Super good. And even in that, it's like a masterclass of like how structured you are with the way you answer. A couple of one thing that I notice is that when I ask a question, also you take time to pause and structure your thoughts. And as a result, so the answer is very much structured. But yeah, it's really interesting. Any horrible experience on stage to reassure us that even the best are also struggling? You can tell us.
Oh, for sure. There have been so many experiences where I go in very energetic, very passionate, and then I watch the talk back and I realized it was over the top. I wasn't taking enough pauses. I was too loud because I had all these nerves and I was channeling them into excitement. But there is such a thing as being over the top. So there are a lot of experiences, especially recorded ones, where I've had to go back and cringe and make sure that I do better next time. One of the things that started happening when I started creating more videos was that all the bad speaking habits that I had immediately surfaced. So there was a time when I was creating videos as a filmmaker, actually, before LinkedIn, and I was aiming to capture some of the behind the scenes stuff. I thought that would be exciting for people to see how we prepare for a shoot. What are we filming? What's happening right now? And I had a videographer follow me around and an editor edit it all together. And the first video that he gave me, I had so many ums and uhs that he couldn't even cut them out, because when he cut them out, it was like, I did this. It was bizarre. So we were in a really bad situation. And he said, Nausheen, you just got to stop saying the ums. That's the only way out. So it's really in these moments where growth happens. So I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, it is very much like this. And I feel also, since I started the podcast, I also feel like listening and practicing your own voice at the beginning. I remember when I was editing, I was like, oh my God, I sound like a child. This is horrible. And then you also get accustomed to speaking more. So you become more structured. And then also you get accustomed to listening to your own voice. So it doesn't seem as cringy anymore. And so I feel like every time you experience with a new format, you're like, oh my God, I look that red or that video or whatever. And then you get accustomed to it and you start mastering it. So I think it comes back to what you were saying also earlier about 17 years of experimenting and figuring it out, condensed in like also the help you can provide a client with, so that they don't spend 17 years figuring it out. So yeah, really interesting. Can you let us know? I know we're like approaching maybe the end of the podcast, but if people are interested to work with you, what type of help do you provide them with, and where can they stay in contact with you?
Sure. So I work with two specific types of people. They are both ambitious and they both feel that speaking with impact has become their Achilles heel and it's standing in the way of them achieving their goals. So that's what's in common between them. One type is corporate execs that want to make sure that they are growing in their careers. But as you grow, inevitably, you have to speak more and more to larger and larger audiences. Very often at the VP or the director level, you are speaking to rooms of strangers, people that have never met you before, potentially external audiences as well. So the work involves working with these people to make sure that they are the best communicator that they can be in terms of their confidence, in terms of arming them with the right tools to become a good speaker, such as modulating their voice, pausing, making sure they're speaking at the right pace, understanding how they can play with the pitch of their voice, making sure they have the right energy, expressions, body language. And I do similar work with entrepreneurs who want to build their personal brand and they want to come out from behind the screen, as you are right now, where you don't just want to make text posts or Twitter threads. You actually want to create video content. You want to be on podcasts, potentially even do some in-person speaking at a conference. But the thought of that either scares you or you feel that it doesn't do justice to the personal brand that you're building. A lot of people review the first podcast that they do and they feel very disappointed. They feel that there's a disconnect between the powerful presence that they want to be and the person they see on the screen. It's a very disconcerting experience, almost traumatizing. So that's what I help solve. I help entrepreneurs who are ambitious, who want to make sure that they are the best speakers, that they can communicate their vision, their expertise with comfort and ease. I help them become that impactful version of themselves on camera and on stage.
Where do we register?
I love that question.
Where can we find you? Interesting.
You can get a lot more detail on my new website, which I'm very excited about. It's called speaking.coach. So if you just go to speaking.coach, you'll find me and ways to work with me, and also little stories about my clients, little stories about me. Hopefully it'll be interesting.
Cool. I'll link that in the notes of the podcast so people can refer to that, as well as your LinkedIn profile, because that's where I discovered you. But thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Loved having this conversation.
If you like this podcast, please do share it with someone who would like it as well. Thank you for listening.